Thrash, stash, dash, and cash. This is how you smuggle hash. In 2020, European authorities made over 90,000 seizures of hashish, the concentrated resin made from marijuana plants. That number may seem high, but in this world, it's a drop in the ocean. The business of hash smuggling, once a sleepy pastime, has gone full throttle. It's a black market generating billions of dollars each year, and one that is increasingly concentrated in the hands of just a few organized crime families. I want to know how they corner the market and scaled smuggling to new heights. And for that, I'm looking for a baron, a king of the hash trade.
Right here, right here.
Portugal. This is where I was born and raised, and where, even after all these years away, I still feel most at home. My hometown of Cascais is just outside of Lisbon, but in my teenage years, it was a world apart from the city. And as sheltered as it was here that I got my very first taste of contraband.
I remember coming here since we were super young. The people would come here to smoke.
Yeah, a lot. There were a lot of people here.
This is my best friend, Barbara, and my little cousin, Teresa. Like many Europeans, the first drug any of us tried was hashish.
I remember not loving the taste, but I did have fun.
Hash was my first connection to the underground and the start of questions that weren't easily answered. Who makes this stuff? And what journey did it take to reach my small corner of the world?
Last time I tried was 25 years ago, I think. Exactly like I remember it.
Today, there's no crime attached to smoking hash. It was decriminalized in Portugal in 2001.
Double this would maybe be a gram, €5.
Double this would be €5. Oh, so this is like 2.5 euros only, which is more or less $2.50. So this costs like less than $1 to make.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, the cigarette that you use for the tobacco
is more expensive.
Costs more
probably.
than the actual drug that's inside.
Probably.
With that low price point, smuggling hash and marijuana has become a volume business. Profits are realized by organized crime groups importing product into Europe by the ton. But how are they pulling that off? And how do I even begin to look for the barones, the all-powerful barons at the top of this trade?
So I have different kinds of hash, different intensities. I have Pacho.
Pacho, that's the name of this one?
Yeah, that's the character from Narcos. These are really good.
Black banana.
Yeah.
My search begins in Lisbon, where Chico, a local dealer, has agreed to talk.
Original Paki.
Yeah.
This is a little softer.
Yeah, that's the softer. That's
Really incredible. The smell is so strong.
Hash is created using the same plant as marijuana. But while marijuana is the flower, hash is the concentrate made from the trichomes, the resin glands, which are extracted from the surface of the plant and pressed into blocks.
This, like, if I sell it for 900 euros. I bought it for 600.
You mean the whole thing?
Yeah, this whole thing.
Yeah.
But this one, I bought it for 200 each plate, and I'm selling it maybe for 350 maximum.
And it's still the #1 drug, right? The most popular drug in Portugal.
In Portugal, yeah, for sure. We have a big tradition of smoking hash. And we are super close to Morocco, and it's easier to get here, and it's cheap to get here.
Although smoking hash is decriminalized, Smuggling it into the country remains highly illegal.
All of the hash that makes it here, it's all from Morocco?
For sure, all of it, yeah.
Back in my time, I had friends, I knew people who would go to Morocco, would buy hash and bring it back to Portugal.
The border is completely different now, and I think only big groups are managing to do it, and they do it with boats, they do it with trucks.
So, and do you have any connections in Morocco?
Yes, it's one of the oldest families.
And where were they, in the northern Morocco?
Yeah, in the mountains, in the Chefchaouen direction, yeah.
And do you think they'd let us follow them?
Let me see.
When it comes to hashish, all roads lead to one place: the Kingdom of Morocco. Located at the northwestern corner of Africa, only 10 miles from Spain, Morocco is a Muslim country which has long served as a crossroads to Europe. By law, hashish cultivation is illegal for recreational use. But in practice, most of the world's supply originates here, controlled by a handful of powerful families.
It's a little bit of an off-road. Wow. Can you see this? There's another of these fields coming up.
A source has promised to grant us access to one of those families. But while we wait, we decide to venture up to where the bulk of marijuana is grown.
So we're driving through the Rif Mountains, where the center of the production of cannabis happens, right there. There's one field here, and we've been driving by all these fields of marijuana. You know, it's supposedly illegal, but it's also, once you arrive in these mountains, you start seeing cannabis everywhere. We also have to be careful with filming, you know, people watching us around here.
We've been told that farmers are wary of outsiders and can be openly hostile to journalists. So we're on our way to meet a local contact who can help make introductions.
Let me drive a little bit, because there's a guy here.
While cannabis has been growing in Morocco for at least 500 years, hashish was only introduced here between the 1950s and 70s. It was brought by travelers from America and Europe on what became known as the Hippie Trail, a passage through Central Asia and India that often included a stop here in northern Africa.
But we were here for weeks before we then drove on to Marrakesh.
When farmers in this region, one of the poorest in Morocco, saw the potential to supply the European market, the hash industry took root. Centered in this town called Ketama.
The guy we're meeting, he says he knows a lot of people here. He can make some introductions. He told us he would be waiting right outside the butcher shop. You can see all the meats hanging here, actually. There's a bunch of butcher shops. Oh, I think that's him. How are you? Mariana.
Mariana.
Good, and you?
Yeah, welcome to East Second.
Thank you so much.
Good. Good.
Nice.
We have a long road between the mountains.
Straight ahead?
Yes.
Great.
The trip to our destination is not for the faint of heart.
This is Ketama.
This is Ketama.
It's a narrow road up a mountain that's blanketed in fog.
Look, there is some cannabis.
Sometimes it's smuggled in donkeys like this?
Yes, and donkeys, horses, even people walking sometimes. Walking from the mountains, going to Tangier. No, you're gonna see something that nobody can see. We can call it the dark place of the Haven cannabis. This place, not for everyone, not for everyone. فين خير؟
How are you?
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
A lot of cannabis here, huh?
Yeah,
This is yours?
yeah.
This farmer, who we'll call Yusuf, is part of a family that's been farming marijuana for generations.
It's Krikita.
Kriquita.
The Kirikita he refers to is an imported marijuana strain known in the West as critical, which features sky-high levels of THC, the compound that gets you high. In the 1980s, hash produced here from local marijuana had an average THC content of 8%. Today, imported strains have levels that can surpass 60%.
Can you hear this noise? I think the beating. I think it's the actual production of hash. Sit right here. Wow. So this is the dried plant, the dried marijuana.
Yeah.
Why is it beating? Why do you need to beat it?
هذه دابا هنا عندنا كيف ناشف كنضربوا عليه باش كيخرج لنا الحشيش لتحت.
So you're hitting it.
Yeah.
Drugs come on the bottom. The trichomes.
Yes, I wanted one. The
Unlike the marijuana smoked in the West, which is actually just the flower of the plant, hashish is the result of a labor-intensive process. It begins with plants that have been dried and covered with plastic sheeting. And then the drumming begins. The goal is to rattle the plant enough to release its trichomes, glands resembling tiny hairs which contain THC.
How long does the process take?
على حسب إذا كانت يابسة كنضربوا عليها غير شي نص ساعة، وإذا كانت رطبة شوية باردة فيها الرطوبة كنضربوا عليها 45 دقيقة. وكيلو كنخدموا 100 الكيلو د الكيف باش كيعطينا كيلو د الحشيش.
How much do you sell this for? The hash, the actual hash?
الثمن ديالها كيوصل ما بين $700 حتى 1100 1200 دولار. اللي كيستافدوا بزاف هما المهربين والناس اللي كيهربوها على برا.
And where does it go to? Where does the hashish go to?
هاد الحشيش الأغلبية ديالها كتمشي لأوروبا.
Europa. It all goes to Europe.
أوروبا وكاين الدول إفريقيا.
If there was no cannabis here, what would people do?
يعني لو ما كانتش هاد النبته هذه هنايا كان غيكون واحد الواقع اخر، فهمتي؟ كان غيكون الجوع وغيكون الفقر وغيكون بزاف د المسائل، لان هاد النبته هذه بزاف د الناس كيلقاو فيها المتنفس، واش فهمتي؟ كاين الاسر وكاين عائلات.
So after 45 minutes, that's it? It's it? Done?
صافي دابا تسالى الوقت، دابا باقي غير ديك اللمسات الاخيره صافي، فهمتي؟
Now we're gonna see what's Wow, look at that.
يا هذه هي الحشيش بودره.
Oh, hashish powder. So from all the huge amount of plants and flower, this is the end product. So this gets pressed into these molds and makes basically the bars.
ايوا كيعرضوها شي حاجه للحراره، شي حاجه تسخن وكيبريسيوها. بالبريسيون وكترجع فحال الصابون.
This is what makes it all the way all across Europe and the rest of the world.
I have no reason to doubt these farmers are telling me the truth, and that the real money is being made much further up the food chain. I've been given permission to accompany one of these farmers to a remote location on the mountain, where the next step of the process will play out, transporting the hash to the coast.
This is pretty remote. We've been driving up this mountain for about 25 minutes now. Hola, buenas. Bonjour. Ça va?
Bonjour.
We saw you yesterday. You were making the drugs. Are you here to give it so they transport it, or do you actually transport the drugs too?
ندير هاد الدراري ديالنا اللي غايديها، انا غنوصلها غير البلاصه كاين اللي غايديها.
And then when you get there, do you give it to the boat people? Do you give it to people who transport in the boat?
كنعطيها الترونسبور ديال الماء، الترونسبور ديال الزوديا.
Ah, so then it goes in the Zodiac.
زوديا البحر.
Okay. And can I see the drugs?
وي.
Yeah. Oh, in this car?
ايه كيل ها
Packed as if it's a suitcase?
ايه
Wow. It's heavy. Very heavy, huh? How much is this?
30 كيلو 30 كيلو 60 كيلو جوج مرات في النهار غادي نمشيو ونجيو ونديرو جوج خطرات في النهار
How much money do you make from driving drugs?
ترانسبورت ديال 3 ديال المنايل الريب والريب 3 ديال المنايل
$3,000 each?
It's no different from cocaine and other drugs I've covered. The farmer has produced a kilo of hash for $1,000 at relatively low risk. Now, as the product changes hands, the risk increases, and so does the price.
So you're driving?
Right.
You're driving the drugs out? Okay. You scared? Dangerous?
راه صعيبه بزاف
Yeah.
صعيبه بزاف راه تكون ما تبقاش مافيا القرطاس ضربوك
Really? Mafia? Like other people trying to steal
وي
drugs?
يحيدوا لك هادي يحيدوا لك هادي يجيو يطردوا لك يحيدوها لك فيها الفلوس يحيدوها لك يقتلوك
The smugglers won't allow me to follow these bales to the sea, and they won't connect us with the operatives higher in their organization. I was counting on a different contact for that access. But as usual, with my job, nothing comes easy.
So we've been in Morocco now for 4 days. Essentially just waiting around. Every day we get a call that we should move to a different city. Our local producer has been trying to call this person as well, and possibly has some news, so we're just waiting for that call. But so far, you know, another day, another Moroccan hotel. Hello?
Hi, Mariana.
Hola, Ana. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? Good. Any news? So we've been calling and texting and nothing. Did you get any luck on your end?
Yeah, I was trying. I called him many times. I texted him and nothing. Yeah, he answered at first and then he stopped answering a couple of days ago, and I haven't heard.
We're gonna try and see if we can get access some other way, but if you hear anything, please let us know.
Okay, Mariana.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. So nothing, basically. He was responsive at the beginning, and then he stopped. She says for 2 days now she hasn't heard from him, and neither have we.
I'm frustrated, but I'm also done waiting. If we can't find a hash kingpin in Morocco, we'll follow the product through the Strait of Gibraltar and look for one on the other side of the sea, where fortunes are made when the drugs enter Europe. But I won't be the only one looking, because when hash crosses these waters, it's pursued with a vengeance. The Spanish port of Algeciras is one of the busiest transshipment hubs in the world, moving goods back and forth across the Strait of Gibraltar, a 10-mile stretch between Morocco and Spain. But not all of those goods are arriving on cargo ships. This is a graveyard of confiscated boats, collected for evidence and awaiting demolition.
Ahora mismo estás encima de una embarcación narcotraficante que, si no recuerdo mal, se le cogió, me parece que 3.000 kilos de hachís.
Wow,
Sí.
¿es normal? ¿Tanta
Sí.
droga?
Entonces son las ideales para el narcotráfico. No se utiliza para otra cosa que no sea para el narcotráfico.
To understand how the hash barons operate, I've sought out an official who pursues them. Miguel Gil-Jare is the head of the Customs Surveillance Operational Unit in Algeciras, targeting smugglers in a high seas game of cat and mouse.
Entonces esto empezó siendo controlado por organizaciones muy limitadas. Familias, grupos delictivos se están afianzando y están llegando a tener una importancia.
Grande.
Son nuevas, grandes. Esta embarcación para ellos es como una perita en dulce. Son ideales para el narcotráfico. Pero bueno, ellos pierden una y al día siguiente tienen dos.
In Spain, building these boats is illegal, So the hash barons are taking their business next door, to my homeland, Portugal. In 2022, Portuguese police raided this warehouse, part of an operation that seized 20 go-fast boats under construction, all being built to smuggle bales of hash from North Africa to Europe.
¿Cuánto costan esas
Esto
embarcaciones?
se está costando entre 120.000 euros.
Wow, es un
Sí, porque esto
gran
lleva,
investimento,
esto
¿no?
lleva 3 motores y en algunos casos 4, ahora se están viendo de 4 motores de 350 caballos que alcanzan una velocidad espectacular.
¿Cuál es el profit de eso, del profito de 3.000?
Enorme.
Entonces son millones y millones de
millones
dólares
y
que
millones
están haciendo.
de euros, de dólares, que llámalo.
Those smugglers sometimes live on these boats for days, in international waters, just waiting for the all-clear sign. And when it comes, engines throttle up that can rocket them to speeds of nearly 60 miles per hour.
Y que tardan 20 minutos en cruzar el estrecho.
Solo.
Solamente 20 minutos.
A lot can happen in those 20 minutes for smugglers. It can mean success, arrest, or all hell breaking loose. Tonight, this elite team is in charge of policing these waters, and they plan on hitting the smugglers hard.
So we're just getting ready to leave. Helicopter's actually up right now, so they're getting information on what suspect boats they're seeing out there.
The hunt for contraband begins in the skies, with a dedicated flight team scanning the shoreline with night vision cameras, searching for incoming boats from Morocco.
Okay. Estamos listos, sí. Yeah, hold on to something. Hold on to something.
This highly trained crew mans a small fleet of patrol boats, equipped with engines powerful enough to pursue incoming go-fast boats.
El helicóptero, míralo.
Oh, you see the helicopter?
Tiene que sacar aquí.
We've been warned that hash smugglers have become increasingly brazen in recent years, leading authorities on chases that can quickly turn deadly.
Dile a uno que vamos a soltar embarcación auxiliar, que nos guíe.
We just saw a boat. We're gonna start chasing after them.
The boat is in Spanish waters, going full throttle towards the coast. It's not responding to hails from police, a telltale sign of smuggling activity. We can't see the boats, but the helicopter surveillance shows it's headed directly towards us.
Está en el río, dijiste?
Sí.
There's a boat that's in a sort of in a river entrance over there.
He's basically purposely going around in circles, making waves. So then when the suspect boat comes out of the river onto the sea, onto this part of the water, it'll be harder for them.
Claro, haciéndole olas le dificultas la navegación, porque es una embarcación más pequeña que la nuestra. Ahí viene, ahí viene, ahí viene, ahí viene, ahí viene.
It's coming, it's coming. Oh yeah, I can see it under the light.
¡La veo, la veo!
Okay, it's right there.
Cierra la puerta, Ana. Ana, la puerta, vamos. Venga.
From this side? No, from that side. Right there, you see it? It's right here, it's right here. He has the helicopter over it too.
To minimize accidental deaths, Marco's team isn't allowed to ram suspect boats or shoot at their engines.
Crazy.
For the smugglers we're pursuing, Getting caught could mean 5 to 7 years in jail, and that creates an incredibly high tolerance for risk.
Are they going? They're going under the pier. They're going under the pier. Se fueron para abajo del pontón, ¿no?
Y ahí se esconden.
¿Y qué van a hacer? ¿Qué van a hacer? Yeah, so they basically hid under the dock here.
La veo.
They're so close, and yet just out of reach.
Pero tienen un modo de escape. De aquí pueden salir. ¿O no?
Sí, por un lado y por otro.
Ahí están, de nuevo. Hold on.
Mira, mira.
We see them again. And they're hiding. Oh my God, look! Hold on!
In this pursuit, one wrong move and people can easily die.
Right in front of us now! They're right here!
But even in the best of circumstances, with the best of equipment, this can feel like a very dangerous exercise in futility.
Con sus muertos.
Se fueron para atrás.
Sí, se escaparon.
And that's it. They escaped, basically. They went to a part that's too shallow and this boat can't go in. You can see just how impossible of a task it is, how difficult it is.
So far in Spain, I'm no closer to finding a hash baron than I was in Morocco. But it seems logical they'd be close by, with so much product on the move. On some days, up to 10 go-fast boats are deployed at once, each loaded with literally tons of hash and pointed at Spanish beaches, sometimes in broad daylight. It's the boldest, in-your-face drug trafficking I've ever seen.
Mamma mia, mamma mia.
And that boldness doesn't stop once the boats have unloaded. The Spanish news media lit up in 2018 when Samuel Crespo, an alleged lieutenant in a local smuggling gang, was injured during an arrest and brought by police to a hospital in the Spanish port town of La Línea. Soon, his associates began to arrive, one after another, more than a dozen men in total, who roughed up 2 police officers guarding the suspect and spirited him away into a waiting car, leaving no doubt as to the balance of power here. The beach towns of southern Spain have the highest unemployment rates in Europe, but social media paints a picture of a job market that exists off the books. Up above, lookouts on the Rock of Gibraltar will collect $1,400 for alerting boats when the coast is clear to land. At sea, captains will collect $27,000 for a successful run. And on shore, in open view of witnesses and cell phones, paid muscle gets to work. Up to $3,200 for a gig unloading hash bales, one that usually takes just a few minutes. Finally, on the road, $6,500 will go to each driver for a breakneck trip down back alleys to deliver the goods to hidden warehouses, usually just 1 or 2 blocks off the beach. If these wages seem impressive, think of the profits realized by the hash barons who pay them. That 30-kilo package of hash I saw in Morocco was worth $30,000, but by the time it reaches Northern Europe, its value will soar to $250,000.
Look at those houses. We're in Marbella, southern Spain, one of the richest, fanciest spots in all of Europe.
Marbella is on the Costa del Sol. In the 1960s, under Spanish dictator Franco, it was developed as a destination for blue-collar workers on vacation. Today, it's host to a different crowd.
It's to the Costa del Sol and Marbella, millionaires' playground of southern Spain.
Earning it a nickname you won't see on tourist posters, the Costa del Crimen, or the Coast of Crime.
A lot of drugs come through here, particularly hash, because we're very close to Morocco. For those at the top of the chain, this is where they like to spend their money. Beneath the sort of glitz and glamour, there's also a lot of violence.
This is a city of combustion, where street scenes viewed through the prism of social media offer strong hints that the hash barons have made themselves at home. But perhaps the strongest indicator here is the abundance of top-shelf criminal defense lawyers.
Hola, Ricardo.
Hola,
¿Cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Muy bien. Gracias.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Daniela?
Daniela?
¿Cómo estás, Mariana?
In Spanish media, Ricardo Alvarez Osario has been called the devil's advocate, an apt nickname for a lawyer who specializes in defending accused drug traffickers.
Marbella is a United Nations of crime because there's not one country or one size of organized crime in the world who has not a representation here.
So we're talking about the Italian mob, Albanians, Russians,
Yes.
Colombians,
Yes.
Mexicans,
Yes.
and on
Yes.
and on and on.
Yes.
He's not exaggerating. On the Costa del Sol, Spanish intelligence has documented at least 113 criminal groups representing 59 different nationalities.
All the hash from the clients that you represent, it all comes from Morocco.
Yes.
All of it, 100%.
110%.
And who is the owner? Who's the owner of the
The owner is
merchant?
Moroccan.
They're all Moroccans.
Yes, always Moroccan people who has the plantations. They call them barones.
The barones, the
Barones.
barons. You know, we're here to look for people who are in the hash business that would talk to us. Do you think you could help us find people who would be willing to talk to us?
They,
Be really
you can figure that the people who has this job, they has nothing to win in the
I know.
situation. They only can lose. But you know what is your weapon in here is that they're curious people. They like to be exposed, they like to take the risk, it's an adrenaline for them. So we just need to match the,
The adrenaline.
and I'm sure you will find it.
While Ricky talks to his connections, I'm working on a different angle. When reporting on MDMA last year, I've learned that Dutch and Moroccan smugglers often have close ties. So I arranged to meet with a smuggler from Holland who's straight out of Central Casting.
La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, muta riazienta e ripenser. Olé!
Wow, that was incredible. You have a wonderful voice.
clapping, huh?
So tell me, how did you end up in Marbella?
It all started because of my brother-in-law in 1985, 86. He owned a few coffee shops in the Red Light District.
In Amsterdam?
And then from one came the other. And those were days. The money was literally hanging on the trees. I just didn't realize it. I was a kid.
Evert Schmollahan was a smuggler who migrated to southern Spain in pursuit of the good life.
So I just went ballistic. I just didn't know how to...
Spend the money?
Yeah.
So
Well, I knew very well how to spend the money. That was the problem.
you didn't know how to save it? And
No.
What did you spend it on?
Oh, anything. Prostitutes, especially. A new car. Every year a new car.
How much money were you making?
Oh, in the good old days, man. 100 grand a week.
Wow.
A week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you were at the peak,
Yeah.
what was your job exactly?
Well, there was a peak when I learned how to repress hash. So I bought all the old rubbish and put it in a big sausage machine, put some ingredients in there, mix it up, and we made beautiful new blocks from it. And I mean, the money was just mental. It was crazy.
And that was all for distribution in Europe? Or
That
was
was
it
all
all
Holland, Dutch people I sold it to, yeah.
And you just recently came out of prison
Yeah,
for trafficking drugs?
trafficking, yeah. It just had to be moved from A to B, and I happened to be in the middle of it.
How much do you think the business has changed since you were in it?
Moroccans adapted to just a few hands, and that's why all the middlemen I kicked out.
So it's just a few groups now that are
Just a
controlling it
yeah,
in Morocco?
yeah.
The production and
The whole thing, because they've got the transports going all over Europe. The price is just, the consumers now want top-notch material.
How organized are they?
Of
or
course,
dangerous?
they're very organized. Dangerous, yeah. You have to show your teeth in this business.
And in terms of getting contacts, getting people to talk to us?
I low-key. They don't like too much attention. No.
Yeah. You think that we will find people to talk to?
Oh, yeah. Just give me a bit of time.
Okay.
I'll organize it for you.
It turns out I won't have to wait. I've been putting out dozens of feelers for the past few months, looking for a hash baron in Morocco or Spain.
Oh, wow. Look at this house.
And right on the heels of my meeting with Everett, a different contact reaches out with an introduction. Which brings me here.
Apparently this is one of the nicest neighborhoods here in Marbella. You could tell because of all the big mansions all around us. And this is also where we've been told there's a person that's in the hash business here who's agreed to speak to us. I think it's here. Yep, this is the house.
I've come for a face-to-face meeting with a baron, a hash kingpin. But there's a twist.
I think it's this guy.
It's not a hash game. It's a hash queen.
Traí lo que siempre trabajamos, chocolate.
Chocolate lo llaman ustedes, ¿ah?
Pues claro.
I'm sitting with a woman known as El Cisne, the Swan, who heads a hash distribution network that stretches from Morocco to the far reaches of Northern Europe.
Son todas marcas de lujo, ¿ah?
Pues claro.
Charro, Chapo. ¿Chapo?
Chapo, un chocolate de lo bueno.
These bricks of hashish are merely samples. Buyers interested in the product will likely be ordering not by the kilo, but by the ton.
Pero un chocolate de lo bueno, pero con un olor muy diferente.
Sí, cada uno tiene un olor diferente.
¿Cómo se sabe la diferencia en la calidad? Solo de...
No, yo tengo que tocarla, tengo que verla, si suelta aceite como es. Yo nunca he fumado, pero sé.
Solo de tocarla.
Solo de tocarla.
¿Por qué nunca fumaste?
Porque no me gusta la droga.
Pero no probaste nunca, ni probarla.
En la vida no me gusta que alguien fuma delante mía.
¿Tú tienes familia?
Claro.
¿Hijos?
Sí.
Sí.
Son todos para mí.
¿Cuántos?
Tengo bastante.
¿Tienes bastante?
Mucha gente dice, ¿cómo tú eres madre y haces eso?
¿Tu marido sabe?
No tengo marido, gracias a Dios. Porque ¿para qué? Yo no necesito un hombre para vivir. Yo me mantengo sola. Yo tengo dinero de cuando tenía 18 años. Tenía coches de lujo cuando tenía 20 años. ¿Para qué voy a tener un marido? Solo yo me encapriché en esta cosa porque me gusta la locura, las cosas así. Yo nunca he soñado. Yo hago la cosa realidad.
No tienes que soñar.
¿Para qué voy a soñar si tengo todo?
¿Es más difícil para ti como mujer en ese trabajo o más fácil? ¿Qué piensas?
Bueno, difícil no es porque en el entorno mío me ayudaron mucho. Entonces nadie puede, digamos, meter conmigo, me protegen mucho.
Es peligroso.
Sí, porque a veces tú vas para la idea de trabajar y viene otro para robar.
¿Ya te pasó eso?
Muchas veces.
Sí.
Sí. Yo quería hacer una entrega y normalmente no llevas tu coche, siempre entrego yo. Pero confiamos y llevamos un coche y estaba en el maletero gente armada, en el maletero.
No.
Sí, sí, sí.
¿Y cómo hiciste para escapar, para salir?
La gente está armada, pero los otros no han salido más. Y muchos ya no están. ¿Dónde están? Nadie sabe dónde están. Están muertos. Tú me robas el mío, ¿qué se espera de mí?
Y en esos momentos no piensas que tal vez no quieres hacer eso más, no te quedas conmigo.
Al revés, cuando te pasa algo así te sientes más poderosa. Te dices, bueno, ya pasa una, ¿qué va a llegar más?
Wow, que tienes cojones, como se dice aquí.
Sí, tengo cojones para muchas cosas. Es que yo últimamente manejo solo el transporte.
¿Y cuáles son los destinos más populares?
Holanda, Bélgica, Francia. Últimamente trabajo en Noruega. El kilo valía 8.000 euros.
¿Cuál es el máximo de mercancía que traes tú de Ash?
¿De Marruecos?
Sí.
En un mes. En un container trae hasta 60 toneladas. En un container.
No.
Sí.
60 tons is a staggering amount. In Northern Europe, the value would equal nearly $500 million.
¿Y cómo lo hacen para...?
¿Cómo lo hacen? Pagando.
Entonces, en el mar, ¿quién se paga?
Aquí hay corrupción en todos los lados.
If what she says is true, and the hash barons have found a way to securely move shipping containers of product into Europe, there's no end to the profits they can make. It's no wonder they've been able to push the small players out and corner the market, and hardly a surprise that they're now willing to kill to preserve it.
Estamos hablando de cantidades enormes. Tú y las personas que compran y venden, ¿cómo hacen a esconder ese dinero?
Haces negocios, blanqueas tu dinero. Entonces puedes hacer empresas, comprar edificios. Yo construyo edificios ahora y yo tengo mi dinero blanco. Yo soy empresaria.
Tension's very high right now. Everybody's yelling. They're unhappy that we're here possibly filming some of the stuff.
The Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, is one of the most breathtaking places on Earth. But a brutal colonial history, political instability, and dire poverty have also shaped it as a nation of extreme violence.
But now they're saying we can go. Okay, I'll go with you.
So this is the local port and the local market. And this is where we know that there's bushmeat being sold. Obviously, we stand out like sore thumbs here with the cameras. Everybody's like looking at us.
In the DRC, approximately 2 million pounds of bushmeat, butchered forest animals, are eaten every year. Regulations on the trade are murky, with illegally obtained animals regularly offered up for sale beside legal ones. Which explains why almost nobody wants us filming here.
There's dried fish being sold, these fried worms, and yeah, right behind me there's a monkey being sold. They're actually trying to cover it up right now.
I've been told that when you see bushmeat for sale in markets like this, live animals may also be hidden nearby. And that's what I'm looking for. Endangered chimps, gorillas, and bonobos that have been captured in the forest and trafficked to the city, part of a multi-billion-dollar black market that threatens the very existence of the world's great apes. A recent report by conservation biologists predicts that chimps and gorillas will lose about 85% of their homelands in the next 30 years. Protecting these endangered animals is a race against time, because in addition to habitat loss, experts are reporting the existence of transnational crime groups that are snatching animals and selling them overseas for astronomical sums. This is what brings me to the Democratic Republic of Congo. I want to understand the black market for these species known as great apes, and to track down some of the people responsible for this gruesome trade.
Wildlife trafficking is the fourth most lucrative crime in the world. We are talking between 20 and $30 billion. The DRC is the only country in the world which has got 3 of the 4 great apes. And here in the Congo Basin, primates in general are paying the price.
Adams Kasinga is an activist whose organization, Conserve Congo, infiltrates trafficking networks and tries to rescue at-risk apes.
A great ape is the closest cousin to a human. It is as smart as we are. We are watching it, but it's also watching us. And when it sees you, it ducks. Then it peeps again. Only a chimp can do that.
Scientists have determined that we share an astonishing 98.8% of our DNA sequence with chimpanzees. They organize their social relationships in ways similar to humans and are capable of complex communication. They know intense friendships and rivalries, and also experience many emotions that we as humans know well. Among them, joy, empathy, anger, and fear. They also excel at problem solving.
It's very difficult to catch a great ape into a snare. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very rare. So the only way to catch a great ape is a gun. That's what kills an ape.
By killing the family around it.
Yes.
And taking the baby chimps.
Great apes flock families. And before you can take a baby away from them, you've got to kill 10 of them.
That is such a crazy number. Given how protective we humans are of our babies, it makes sense. And yet, it's almost impossible to fathom that there are people out there who are willing to slaughter entire families.
We have what we refer to as tiers when it comes to wildlife trafficking. Tier 1 being the hunter who kills the animal. But
who kills or catches if he
kills
wants it
and
alive.
catches,
Yeah.
both at the same time. You cannot catch before killing. Tier 2 is what we refer to as a transporter. These are the people who transport the products or the species to these areas, urban centers. And when he reaches here, there will be somebody waiting there. We call him a marketer. This is tier 3, so he connects
So
with
you've
everybody.
actually caught some of these
Of
guys.
course, that's what we do every day.
It's an uphill battle. Across sub-Saharan Africa, the clips of ape rescues document tedious and dangerous operations, which sometimes free animals, but often end up simply recording tragedies.
If we had arrived here 2 days ago, we were going to find it alive. But she's been shot, and as you can see, she had a baby. She has been breastfeeding. They only have a baby once every 5 years. It's a pity.
And what about the hunting? Where is that happening right now?
Anywhere there's a forest, there's a poacher.
And all of them willing to kill great apes and hunt?
They will kill anything that comes across it. This is a very harsh place.
To start our investigation, we head to where Adam says there's a lot of poaching activity, the Kahuzi-Biega National Park, a protected region in the eastern DRC. But getting to the park, like many things in the Congo, requires time, money, and connections. The Congo cannot be traversed by road. In fact, only about 5% of roads in the DRC are paved. So our trip begins with a 2-hour flight east to the city of Goma. Then a 4-hour ferry to Bukavu. And finally, a 2-hour drive in 4x4s, accompanied by a prayer.
Father, we pray that so that you will be at our departure, at our arrival, and at our returning time. Father,
We've been joined by Horeb Bulambo, a renowned Congolese journalist who in the past has braved these treacherous roads and made contact with
in the
poachers.
name of Jesus Christ, amen.
So do you guys do that every time you go up?
Yeah, we do this every time.
Have you been? You've been up several times before?
Several times, yeah. Yeah, we are ambushed by armed groups, but they started beating Mika. They are very fast and so on. We always believe that only God can save you for such mission.
Right, and which is why also we're all wearing protective
Yeah, that's
gear.
why we're wearing this too. Okay, thank you. Good.
Horeb has learned that an active band of poachers is operating 20 miles north of here. But in this war-torn region of the DRC, it's a very risky journey.
We're entering the park, but it also is ungoverned territory. It's a very concentrated area for military checkpoints. There's another one right here. We just passed by one. And that's because we're entering basically rebel territory.
For over 25 years, this area has served as a staging ground for armed rebel groups. The stories of robberies, killings, and rapes here are all too real.
Coming up on a very muddy, I mean, it's a crater in the floor. Holy moly. He says to go here. Oh, now he's stuck.
Let's push from the front. No, it's blocked. You can't go beyond.
Not the best place to get stuck, for sure.
In fact, it's one of the worst. It's so dangerous that should our team fail in our attempt to pull the car free, we've been told to abandon it rather than wait for help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is it?
Yeah, this is the way.
Go from here?
4 long hours later, we've arrived in an area where Horeb has arranged a meeting with a group suspected of trafficking and killing great apes.
Down there
Okay.
is hidden in a hidden place. Approchez, approchez.
Oh, this is it. This is where they have their camp. Okay, he's putting on his disguise right here.
We've made contact with a man we're calling Jean, the leader of a clan of Batwa pygmies that is rumored to be poaching great apes.
Voici, madame.
Oh, wow. Holy moly. It's so it's a trap, basically. They got... Okay. Oof.
Ça, c'est très goûtable.
Very delicious.
Oui.
The Batwa are an at-risk group in the DRC. Compared to the majority Bantu people, who represent 80% of the population, they number less than 1% and have experienced widespread discrimination.
Nos ancêtres, nos arrière-parents vivaient dans cette parc. Les Congolais nous a chassés du parc, ce qui a fait que nous manquons là où on peut vivre, avec les pygmées.
Wow. So you're saying basically that the government calls this a park, a protected area, but they call it this their home, their land. They also say that you're poaching illegally endangered species.
On ne chassait pas des animaux de gros bétail. Là, on ne touchait pas.
Maintenant, donc, c'est-à-dire que les espèces là qui sont en voie de disparition, les chimpanzés, les gorilles et autres choses, c'est vrai qu'on est en train d'encore de les exterminer, mais ce n'est pas vous.
C'est pas nous.
On a prior trip here, Horeb had been told that this group was catching chimpanzees in the park. But if that's not the case, we've just taken a very treacherous journey for nothing.
We're not here to judge.
Yeah.
We're just here to understand and ask questions.
Que les questions soient les bienvenues.
Donc, ce n'est pas question de cacher l'information, même si les pygmées ne tuaient pas les chimpanzés à l'origine ou les gorilles, mais attraper, parce que ils sont les experts de la forêt.
Le gouvernement a chassé les pygmées du parc. Ils n'ont pas offert autre opportunité pour leur survie. Raison pour laquelle, même aujourd'hui, on ne refuse pas, on effectue la chasse. Les chimpanzés, là, on les a attrapés. Les communautés bantoues, ils ne savaient pas comment on peut attraper chimpanzés. Ils nous demandaient comment on devait avoir le bébé d'un chimpanzé.
Et combien d'argent est-ce qu'ils...
Ils nous donnaient presque $10.
$10?
$10.
$10?
Oui.
Seulement?
Oui, seulement.
Pour un bébé?
Oui, pour un bébé. Et ils partent avec. On nous dit, non, ça peut coûter $100,000. Non, ça peut coûter $50,000 par les on dit. Mais vraiment, on n'a pas de certitude.
While higher-level traffickers might ultimately earn life-changing sums, Jean's take is only enough to feed his family for about a week.
Combien de chimpanzés vous avez attrapé?
Au moins 5 chimpanzés qui ont été vendus. Mais en réalité, attraper ce bébé, c'est vraiment un danger parce que sa maman ne vous laissera pas partir avec son bébé.
On doit tuer la maman?
Oui.
Like humans, chimps normally give birth to just one baby at a time. And for the first 5 years of its life, that baby never strays far from its mother.
When you hear the baby crying and screaming and the mother coming, do you feel bad? Do you feel sad?
Oui, normalement, mais on est obligé, lorsqu'on a eu la demande, et on n'a pas de moyens.
It's only after we finish talking and a measure of trust has been established that they decide to take me to one more location in the bush.
So the animals try to come through here, they step on this and they're trapped.
Il est bloqué à ce niveau. On avait besoin de dire que non, on veut trouver celui qui est encore vivant.
Quand ils sont morts,
quand il est mort, c'est à manger.
Manger.
Oui, il y a des demandes aussi pour les morts pour trouver à manger.
Jean's group is collecting $10 for a baby chimp, a pittance even for first-tier traffickers. But it's complicated to lay blame. Although they have drawn first blood, the men I've just met feel that they have no other option.
Let's not think in a monolithic way. Not every poacher do this because that's what they want to do. But there are those who are compelled to do it because of life's hardships. If you go in the so-called protected areas, there are no schools, there are no hospitals, there is nothing. So if the state is going to say, don't touch, get out of there, it has to come up with ways and means on how these people can also live a decent lifestyle.
In the absence of legitimate opportunities, the black market provides its own. In this case, Tier 2 smugglers who transport captured animals and bring them to major cities in the DRC. I'm wondering what sort of quick money they can make for a baby ape they've just purchased for $10. It's been incredibly difficult to make contact with a transporter, but finally, one of Horeb's contacts comes through.
The guy we're meeting asked us to meet him here in a church on the outskirts of town. We're in a place where he sort of felt safe. We don't know much about him. We know we can call him Jacques. That's what he wants to be known as, and that he was involved in the trade. Thank you for coming. Alors, c'est Jacques?
Oui, c'est Jacques.
At the edge of a protected forest in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I'm meeting a man who says he's wanted by the police.
Are you religious? Is that why you wanted to meet here in the church?
Ndio, niko kanisa. Donc hakuwezi kuwa vya mbaya deja binaweza nikuta.
So, can you tell me what you do?
Mimi nilikuwa nafanya kazi. Hii kazi nilikuwa nifanya zamani ya kuozisha mashimpanze.
How many chimps do you think you sold?
Nilikuwa nishaozisha hata 4 hivi. Kama tukoozisha ile vitu, tunauzishaga ndio par commande. Deke nao wanaipata na sisi wanatuletea, tunauzisha, tunawauzia, kisha na sisi tunaita sasa wale wao wanatuuziaka. Kitu fulani ishakuwa tayari.
And who were they? They were Congolais ou étrangers?
Bobe tunauziaka parfois wanakuwa wa étrangers, mais wanapitia mu wa Congolais.
How much were you buying the chimpanzees and how much were you selling them for?
Wale watu wa mpori tulikuwa tunawauzia tu basi, wao hawatuuzisha sana, wanaweza tupatia tuwapatia hata $50 au $100. Kisha na sasa tunaenda kule, wanaweza tupatia hata $1000 vya vile. Basi utawewa ya kabambi yenyewe hautaweza, ile ya kidogo ndio tunabewaka tunapelekea wenyewe watakuwa nao.
Bébé de 1, 2 mois, pour moi, ou de quel âge?
Tujua que sasa kama ni ya 1 mois juu après tu kuitwala sha tutatiria attention tena na kaisha kwa na 1 mois juu hatutaweza siku ilizaliwa. Bora tu tuwe kama ni kitoto tunabewa, inaweza kuwa kama ni ya 1 mois 2 mois tunabewa tu.
But how do you carry the chimpanzees, the baby chimpanzees? Where? In a cage or where?
Tunaitia mu carton, kisha tunatobola carton. Bien vile.
Were you ever stopped by the authorities?
Ndio.
Oui.
2 fois.
2 fois. Et qu'est-ce qu'il en fait?
L'argent.
Vous a donné de l'argent alors? How much money?
Hata $20, hata 50.
$50 goes a long way here. It's about a month's wage for an average worker. And when poverty meets weak institutions, as it does throughout the DRC, it sets the stage for a thriving black market.
Why did you stop?
Na hapa sasa tulifanya ya mwisho bakabana wenzetu wenye tulikuwa tumika navo. Na mpaka hivi bamua kwanza bangali mu prison. Mie Mungu akanisaidia. Sasa mweli 3 jours ndio akanionyesha njia kisi niende na njia nikatoka.
For Tier 2 middlemen like Jacques, the next step is to ship apes up the Congo River to the capital, Kinshasa, and hope they survive the journey.
So along the way, they will die of disease, they will die of stress, they will die of hunger, they will die of suffocation because they're being concealed, and so on and so forth.
Adams Kasenga says the babies that reach the capital alive will now be sold to traffickers on the 3rd tier.
These are the movers and the shakers of the trade. He's going to charge you $5,000. and for something which he has bought for maybe $500.
To locate third-tier traffickers, those who have contact with foreign buyers, Adams has suggested I visit a live animal market in Kinshasa.
On va arriver sur terrain, on va essayer de voir le terrain, parler avec les gens qui sont là. Si on nous donne l'autorisation, cela sera possible.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna try and go film this live animal market that he says is right on the side of the street. It's about 10 minutes from here.
Oh, wow. You see that? Basically, I can see there's like a monkey that's chained and a bunch of other animals right here on the side of the road. Oh, wow. Hello. Good, I'm Mariana. Gaddafi?
Oui.
Gaddafi. Combien d'argent pour l'acheter, vous savez?
$250.
250.
Oui.
So he's saying they're selling this this monkey for $250. Et pour les parrots?
130.
130 for the gray parrots. These are actually endangered species. They're called gray parrots. They're endangered. There's 5 of them here, and a bunch more over there, actually.
Despite the open trade in endangered animals, like these gray parrots, I've heard that animal sellers won't risk selling chimps or other great apes out in the open. So I'm talking to this man, Gaddafi, to see if he'll open up about how they're trafficked.
What type of a monkey is this?
Babouin.
A baboon.
6 mois.
6 months. Oh, so it's a baby baboon. Et ça, c'est combien? How much money?
Moi, c'est 650.
$650.
The owner of the market sees him talking to us and decides he wants to talk too, but he wants his identity protected.
So baboon, monkey, gray parrots, rabbits, python, turtle. Et tout vient de la forêt?
Oui, oui.
Et vous avez aussi de chimpanzés?
Non. Pas ici. C'est très dangereux pour les gens de l'environnement.
Et à qui sont les personnes qui viennent acheter?
Il y a risque. Il y a beaucoup de risques.
He said it would be dangerous for him to give us any names, but Gaddafi here was also looking at me and trying to say that it's something that we can talk when we leave this place, that he can give us some more information.
Gaddafi has agreed to meet us out of earshot of his boss.
Do you know any chimps for sale here in Kinshasa, in the city?
Oui, na Kinshasa, batera washipani. En public, batera wayakubatama. C'est ça la recherche. So ça lui demande, biso te fait voyager, te bringi batamboka kuna po batuna biso bazana mboka kuna. Lui na recherche ba chasser bada kuna bulu ke la biso sipandi e ko monana. So monani neto luki système ya ekota masuwa ya. Même en Équateur kuna ekoti masuwa e toluki.
How much do they pay? The people that buy it for you?
Nani na zama kuna si la province togo so mango même na $50 be 80. Oya biso tateka ba 1200. To teteka ngo ba 1200 de façon to lekisa ngo na pasi eleka na pasi.
Have you ever been caught by the authorities?
Wow, bakanginga na notepo na ebini ya kolekela ngo. Na lega ya moko na kutaba député moko kutaba soda bakonja bakosoda.
Do you know where the chimps go when they leave the country?
Na lokalante na kiparate na kiparante.
You don't care where it goes?
Na evite.
You know, unfortunately, I kept pressing and trying to get to possibly see a live chimp somewhere. You know, they weren't really willing to reveal much information about that. They say that usually it's actually done on command for order. So once somebody comes here and orders a chimp, he can get it.
It's rare that baby chimps are intercepted, but when it happens, many are brought here, to the Luiro Rehabilitation Center.
Wow, there's the chimps right here. That's a really big one here. Wow.
These are the so-called lucky ones. Many were rescued from poachers or outgrew their utility as pets. But in all cases, they were taken in after young lives filled with trauma.
How old is this guy?
These can be 15, even 20.
Luis Flores is head veterinarian here.
What's their state when they're first rescued, when they first arrive? Mentally, how do they arrive here?
Well, sometimes they arrive very afraid of humans.
Of humans.
Sometimes they can have gunshots in some places. You need to treat them psychologically and also medically.
A lot of these babies have actually seen their mothers being killed in front of them.
Well, you know, they suffer a lot. And when they are sad, you can see in the face. To be orphan is one of the worst things that can happen to a human being.
To an animal as
And
well.
probably to a chimpanzee that is very close to us. Chimpanzees, they are hunted, okay, for meat, no? It's what we call bush meat. The meat is consumed by the people, and after the babies, they pass through the traffic.
To export as part of a trafficking network?
Yeah, exactly.
So on the one hand, you have people who kill them for meat.
Yeah.
And on the other, you have the people that catch them and
For trafficking.
for trafficking. So where are they going?
Most of the time to Asia or, you know, to the Arabic countries that are not far from here.
It's the UAE, Dubai, and
Yeah, in this country where there is a demand of chimpanzees as pets.
The Arabian Gulf is the biggest market now for the great apes as exotic pets and to go into these big safari park type zoos, wildlife parks.
Back in LA, I meet up with Daniel Stiles, one of the world's foremost experts on wildlife trafficking. He confirms what I heard in the DRC, that one of the biggest markets for baby apes is currently in the Middle East.
So this is how they sell them?
Yep. So this is like an advertisement by a supplier in Kinshasa.
Yeah.
He says, does anybody want these chimps? And if anybody does, whoop, they're on a plane and they're off to Dubai. These are the ones that didn't survive the poor transport. And that one's been damaged in capture.
You can see his head.
Yeah.
He has injuries on his head.
That's a gorilla. They're the most desired of the great apes. I've got prices actually offered by a trafficker in Dubai. The equivalent is over $500,000.
$500,000
$500,000.
for a gorilla.
Of which there are many in the Gulf. Many. A lot of private wildlife parks are springing up, belonging to private individuals. And they're patterned after ones we have here in the US.
Hmm.
And I think you've heard of Doc Antle.
I have indeed.
3 years ago, I investigated Doc Antle and his operation in South Carolina, a so-called animal sanctuary that was charging visitors $500 to take selfies with baby animals.
I am the only one qualified in this activity of raising cubs.
Antle was later arrested by the FBI and has recently been convicted of 4 felony counts related to wildlife trafficking.
He's one of the prime ones that have sort of inspired these guys, I think. They're linking the wildlife park with the social media accounts to drum up business. That's the biggest new thing that's evolving now in great ape trade.
Once upon a time in Hollywood, great apes were routinely used to drum up attention and dollars at the box office. Today, the screens are smaller, but the same dynamic is at play overseas, where baby animals draw likes on social media and attract paying customers to private zoos. But now that I know how the market works, it's impossible to see a baby chimp in captivity without wondering just how it reached foreign soil. That's why I set my sights on investigating this social media post about a baby chimp named Koba by Jason Ali, a man who calls himself the UAE Lion King. Given the complexities of captive breeding programs, Daniel Stiles told me that it was very unlikely that there are any located in the UAE. So how would this baby chimp named Koba leave his home country, possibly the DRC, where I had just been, and suddenly arrive in a zoo 3,000 miles away? I wanted to go to the UAE to investigate, but our request to film in the country was denied. So I sought help from an insider.
The people that you are up against are extremely powerful. They have a lot of money, and they can just, do whatever they want.
Zara Havelsas is a Swedish national who lived as an expat in the UAE and spent years volunteering and caring for animals at the Rock Zoo, owned by Jason Ali.
So we've got a big tiger and somebody on top of the tiger. Is that him?
That would be him, yeah.
Lion King UAE, is that that's his
Yeah,
name?
he wants to be Doc Antle.
Jason Ali opened the Rak Zoo with government support in 2009. He claims his mission is to rescue animals neglected or mistreated by their previous owner.
And this is the zoo that we've actually been investigating, as you know, because they have a new baby chimp that has just arrived.
Koba.
Koba, yeah.
The comments are just, people are loving it.
Oh my God,
I want
he looks
one,
so
I want to see it.
cute. Yeah. This one says, I could watch this on repeat. The love and tenderness he gives and receives from the animals, so attractive. This baby couldn't have been born there.
No.
They have to have come from somewhere in Africa, probably,
Exactly,
right?
yeah. For that baby to be there in his arms now, her whole family would have had to be shot. She would have been pried from her dead mother's arms, shipped over in the most horrific way, or on someone's private jet.
So you still have people that you work with.
Yeah.
And do you think that they are people who can help us try to figure out where this animal came from?
Yeah, for sure.
Less than a week later, Zara asked two friends to visit the Rock Zoo, where a handler woke Koba up so they could purchase time with her.
How old is Koba?
1 year.
Can I just... I don't want a picture, I just want to hug him. Is it okay?
No, you want to come see, you have to pay. It's 100 dirham ticket. If you like monkey.
It's, I will pay. That's no.
No, I can come inside, yeah. You can.
I can pay by card?
Yeah, no problem. Card, you have cash.
I have card only.
Come.
Where's the mom?
Mom, go here. Mom is Simpson mom.
Ah, she's not here.
No, it's her but before only put the father there.
So why not he go to sleep with them?
He don't like to stay here.
He doesn't like to stay there? He's born here? Born here.
While we can't come out and say that these claims are untrue, we can say that at 1 year old, a chimp is normally inseparable from its mother. And when Zara followed up with the same trainer, he contradicted what he told the visitors and said that he didn't actually know if the baby's family was at the zoo. We reached out to Jay Somali to ask if he wanted to respond to our story. Through an assistant, he repeated the claim that Koba was born at his zoo, although when asked to provide any evidence, they refused. Zara says that illegal wildlife trafficking in the UAE is widespread, evidenced by sellers openly advertising animals on social media.
So I can reach out to any of them and say, hey, do you guys happen to have a chimp for
And I
sale?
see in the comments all the time, how much do you sell them for? And then they probably DM them.
And in fact, that's what Zara did right after our conversation and found a trafficker on Instagram. An animal that may have been bought for $10 to $50 in the very forest I just left is now on sale in the UAE for $350,000. And most likely, it got there illegally. For great apes to cross most international borders, they must carry paperwork authorized by CITES, a global treaty between 184 parties that issues permits to regulate the trade of captive wild animals and maintains a database to track their movements.
The world is looking to us and has confidence in us to play our part in addressing these challenges.
Yvonne Higuero is the Secretary General of CITES. So any great ape, any chimpanzee, any bonobo, any gorilla that is leaving, for example, the DRC, that trade is not legal, correct?
Normally, yes.
We spent some time in the DRC, in the Congo, investigating the wildlife trafficking, particularly of great apes. And if you go on social media, for example, you'll find a lot of chimpanzees and sometimes even gorillas and bonobos in places like Dubai, in zoos, in safaris, and private homes. We were told by experts that these great apes, that it's not possible for these chimpanzees, for example, to be bred in captivity, that if they have baby chimpanzees, they must be coming from the wild. Is that correct?
They're very difficult to breed in captivity. If there are baby chimpanzees, this is a concern because obviously, yes, there must be something that is going on.
So this is the one particular case that I do want to bring to your attention, and I'd love if you can investigate further. It's a baby chimp that goes by the name of Koba or Kuba, and he's at Rock Zoo. He's about 1 year old, more or less.
But we will check. That I can definitely look into. I will try to find out about this particular chimpanzee.
But the Secretary General's office later told us that they would not investigate Koba unless we could provide evidence that the chimp was illegally taken from the wilds. They suggested we reach out to a local CITES delegate in the UAE, and we did, several times, but they never provided answers. If it all feels like a bureaucratic runaround, it's because CITES has no actual enforcement arm. Even if it was determined that Koba was trafficked, CITES can't send a team in to rescue him. And so the grim reality is that protecting apes requires an approach that goes beyond treaties. And in the DRC, that approach includes putting AK-47s in the hands of rangers. In the DRC, the race is on to protect great apes before they're killed for meat or trafficked abroad. Towards the end of my journey, I joined a patrol with a group of rangers led by a man named Juvenal Muganka.
Be careful here.
The greatest danger to gorillas is habitat loss, but there are others.
We're actually in rebel territory, which is why a lot of these guys are also carrying guns in case there's poachers, and there's a lot of landmines in this area.
Careful, there is gorilla poop here.
Whoa, so this is gorilla poop right here.
Yeah.
So we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. This is a first nest, and it's a female with kids.
So by nest, you mean this is where they slept? This was their bed last night?
Yeah. The gorillas was here last night.
Trekking through the forest, you can see what an incredibly difficult place this is to navigate, let alone patrol.
Juvenal?
Yes?
There you are. It's really slippery here now.
Yeah, be careful.
In 2 hours, we've traveled barely more than a mile. And then, as we enter a particularly dense section of the forest, the patrol stops.
There is some of the group here.
Some of the group is right here?
Yeah, it's here now.
Oh my God, it's right here. Oh, it's right here. Oh my God. It's right in there. He's starting to make the noises. Juvenal is starting to make the growling noises. Oh my God. Come on. Right there. Crazy.
Nothing can prepare you for this. the majesty of a full-grown silverback. Not in a cage or behind steel bars, but as free as you or me. In its own habitat, caring for its family, living without fear.
Tons of them over here. The mother is actually holding a baby gorilla that was born just last week. Yeah, I mean, to know that they're basically killing, the family's killing the silverback so they could take and sell the baby gorillas. So there's a lot of incentive to kill these animals. But still, you know, when you're in the presence of these animals, it's really hard to understand how somebody could do that. You know, so if we keep on this way, you know, by the time my son is my age, there might be no gorillas left. And that's a really sort of emotional and sad, sad thought, as beautiful as this moment is. It really is special that you feel so privileged to be here and see this. Juvenal, what does it feel to you every time you see a gorilla? For me, it was incredibly emotional, but for you?
For me, they're my first babies. I must take care of my family. This is my first son, the gorillas. As I take care of my sons at home, so I can take care of this one. I have to protect them. Yeah.
Juvenal, you're making me cry. Do you think that in 30 years, we'll still be able to see gorillas in the wild like this?
If we do not take care of them, they can be extinct. So we must take care, we must protect them.
Compared to all the other black markets I've covered, this was one of the most emotional for me.
I've got goosebumps everywhere.
To know how much suffering, how much death humans cause to these great apes is beyond imagination. But there are ways we can help. We can take a stand against the exploitation of apes for entertainment and reduce demand. We can work to alleviate poverty and help people find alternatives to poaching. And we can put more resources into protecting great apes in the wilds and preserving their habitats. There is still time, but barely. I've reported on the illegal trade of human organs in the past. So I thought I'd seen it all in terms of those making a killing from body parts. But recent headlines have identified another unexpected trade in human remains.
Illegally selling body parts. Arms, legs, heads, torsos.
Man, that is sick.
One that's even stranger and closer to home.
4 human skulls in a box.
Headed for South Carolina.
In the shadows of the legal death industry, there's a bustling trade in stolen body parts.
Even $10,000, I'm surprised it's that high, because you could take one of those pretty easily.
Black market operators are selling everything from skulls and bones to spines and skin.
This is the remaining portion that I have of
human skin.
all to the highest bidder.
I could bring a lunchbox into the prep room and cut out a kidney, and no one would ever know.
It all begs a terrifying question. What really happens to your body after you die?
Life doesn't end when you're in the ground. I could carry around a portion of somebody for the next 200-300 years.
I'm driving through the valleys of western Colorado and thinking about the logistics of death. On paper, what happens to a body after death looks fairly simple. Typically, the first stop is a funeral home, where the body is sent to be prepped for cremation or burial. If, instead, the person has chosen to donate their body to science, it goes from the funeral home to a tissue bank or university donation program, before being used for training, education, or research. But as the people of Montrose, Colorado know all too well, things don't always go as planned.
I get a call from the FBI. They want me to come in, and I'm thinking, well, what the heck did I do now? So I went down to the sheriff's department and went in there, and he says, you might be a victim of, cutting up the body parts. And I'm thinking, what? I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Tonight, a funeral home owner and her parents now under investigation by the FBI.
The accusations are outlandish.
As local news reported, Megan Hess and her mother, Shirley Koch, owners of the Sunset Mesa Funeral Home, were charged with the stealing and selling of body parts from more than 500 corpses.
Her organs from her mother's heart to liver, and even her hands and feet were sold to so-called body brokers.
I want to understand how this grisly black market works, so I've come to meet with the families of her victims.
My father called me and asked if I had been watching the news about Sunset Mesa, and I hadn't.
Claims of secretly dismembering and selling body parts.
She came with an SUV, a body bag, and a gurney. And I never called her.
Federal agents followed and arrested Megan Hess and Shirley Koch.
She was creepy. She was very creepy, and there were very many red flags.
Everybody trusts a funeral home, and you can't.
Throughout the investigation, the victims' families became an informal support group for each other.
Different parts of her were sold, and then they listed the parts. And that was really difficult to hear.
Hannah was 23 when she passed away, and they sent her to Sunset Mesa for cremation. With that in mind, they decided that they would steal her spine. She had a beautiful tattoo of Harmony and her brother and sister on her back. How do you get a spine out of a 23-year-old girl's back?
That's the nightmares that you live with.
Just picturing everybody here, somebody just hacking your loved one up.
Laura was sold before I got there to make the arrangements.
Within 24 hours?
Less. She was gone.
To be clear, with consent, the selling of corpses and body parts in the United States by tissue banks or universities after they've used them for their initial purpose is completely legal. What's illegal is charging up to $1,000 for cremations that never took place, secretly dismembering the bodies, and selling the most valuable parts to customers. Buyers were charged $300 for a spine, $500 for a head, more than $1,200 for a pelvis with upper legs. And they had no responsibility to check that the bodies had been donated willingly. All told, Hess netted $1.2 million. To cover her tracks, she returned fake ashes to the families, a scheme that was exposed by former employees of the funeral home.
Instead of cremains, their cherished boxes contain cement, sand, and what appear to be old batteries.
So nobody got their loved ones back. Nobody. They just mixed them all together with trash.
Megan Hess ran a funeral home, and she ran a body donation business out of the same building. That's the problem with this industry. It can be done legally, it can be done lawfully, it can be done ethically, but right now that depends on the personal ethics of the people running these businesses. Oversight from the government is truly lacking.
Paul Micah Johnson was the lead agent on the FBI investigation that busted Hess and her mother.
At the risk of getting a little bit philosophical, I think that most of us are uncomfortable with death. So that industry that requires dead bodies is something that most people don't think about and don't want to think about. And because of that, there's lots of room for things to go on unnoticed.
The U.S. stands out for allowing a for-profit trade in human remains with very little regulation. That combo has made the U.S. the Wild West of body parts. As Agent Johnson saw firsthand in a case that became a sensation in the Detroit area.
Arthur Rathburn accused of buying, storing, selling, and renting diseased human body parts to doctors.
Body parts of more than 1,000 different people. Heads, arms, legs.
He had dozens of freezers filled with human remains, often unwrapped, piled directly on top of each other, frozen together. He had a regular refrigerator, and in that there was a human head as well as some of his food. A sandwich was in there near a human head. A metal container that had 4 human fetuses mixed in with floating slices of human brain. His warehouse was something of nightmares.
Rathburn was an extreme case, but Johnson says that he's seen abuse all over, at funeral homes, in the university donation programs, and at both for-profit and non-profit tissue banks.
Just like any other illegal activity, the primary incentive is money. So it comes down to greed.
It's a chilling assessment. And as my investigation takes me to Arizona, it's time to find the folks who see the dead as dollar signs.
Most people, when they think of whole body donation, they don't really realize the impact that it has on medicine and society as a whole. Whole body donation saves more lives in this country every single year than transplant donations, than all the lives saved, put together in transplant since transplant began. Because you couldn't have the medicine we do today, the advancements in medicine we do today, if it were not for donors.
To understand the criminal possibilities of this trade, I need to see how the legitimate side of the industry works. Research for Life is a tissue bank that depends on body donations. It's run by Garland Shreves, who works alongside his wife and some of his children.
Research for Life is a whole body donor organization. Donors benefit either medical education or research.
Shreves is opening his doors to us because he believes in transparency of a process that some might find disturbing.
What does your family say about your job?
They never want to talk about it. The first 6 months, they didn't want to hear a singular thing.
If you're dealing with an ethically run company, this is what body donation looks like behind the scenes.
So I'm going to cut off the knee and then sew.
When a body arrives, it's kept in cold storage before the procurement process, where the body is cut up into smaller pieces for sale around the world.
And then this is to tag so we can identify the donor once we ship out the tissue.
This leg, for example, might be sent to a medical device company or an orthopedic surgeon needing a practice specimen.
You may ask me any question that you like, but you're not going to see any blood or gore or anything of that nature.
Garland Shreves opens his doors several times a year to people who are considering donating their bodies to medical research.
What's under the blue tarps here?
This tag tells me it's a torso, it's a human torso.
Tissue banks, like Research for Life, provide the cadavers needed for vital hands-on training. Everything from hip replacement practice for surgeons to teaching first responders how to intubate patients relies on body donation.
Remember, you don't want to suction for more than 10 seconds because you're taking the air out of their body.
When we are notified that a donor is en route, they're going to come up a ramp and they're going to go directly into this refrigerator that will reduce the rate of decomposition. So you can come over and you guys can take a look inside.
Oh, are we going in?
You can go in if that's what you like.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You can see them right there.
I saw enough.
Shreves' business depends on finding people willing to donate their bodies for free. So he's eager to show these potential donors the care they take in each step of the process.
Are these like all the same body parts?
They're different body parts. This is a mid-forearm to fingertip. It's got a donor number on it. You see that? Everything is tagged. Everything is marked where it came from, how it can be used, a reminder that it has to be treated with dignity and respect.
There is a lot more that is legal than is illegal in this industry. It doesn't matter if people are trading bones or tissues or pieces of brain. The buying and selling of body parts is completely legal at the federal level, completely.
That's what's so different about the body parts trade than other trafficking stories I've covered. The bad actors are often part of the legal industry because, just like body donation businesses, the criminal trade depends on access to body parts. That's why Megan Hess's funeral home was the perfect cover. As I try to find an active player, I cross-reference complaints and citations against other funeral homes and tissue banks. I search Yelp reviews looking for suspicious anecdotes, and I reach out to dozens of people in the industry.
You worked in the tissue bank industry for many years, correct?
About 30 years.
No one would bat an eye if I was working on a body and it had a huge chunk of skin missing. Human skin sells pretty frequently, and it's expensive.
Which body parts were they?
Arms, feet, legs.
I know that a lot of samples that we've come across have been old retired medical specimens. So various colleges use them. They usually get them from mortuaries or tissue banks or stuff like that.
I know this is always, kind of a complicated question, but if you think you could share any contacts, we know there's a lot of people out there that know a lot of stuff and don't want to talk about it.
Eventually, I catch a break.
It's been a really hard one to crack, just no one wants to talk. It's a very sort of secretive and closed community. Most people that we spoke to said that they are afraid that even if we put a mask on them and disguise their voice, that they think that everyone will know who they are. So we're meeting this guy that I've spoken to on the phone. He's a funeral director. He agreed mainly because we're meeting in sort of an undisclosed location. He says he has some stuff that he wants to show us. Quite curious to know what that is. But this is it. This is the motel. Did you hear about the Megan Hess case in Colorado?
I did.
Do you think that's happening right now in other places across America?
Yes. Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay.
It's happening. It's happening. It's too easy to not happen.
When and I guess why did you become a funeral director?
because I knew that I could, and I know that a lot of people can't or aren't willing to, because it's disgusting and it's very hard work. I was responsible for everything, so basically any aspect you can think of.
So you're talking in the past tense. Are you not a funeral director anymore?
I still have my license, but I have left that business just because I think it's too ugly for me. We're overworked. We are horribly underpaid. And eventually just spending most of your time with dead people instead of living ones, it's not a fun job.
This is a really difficult story, and it's been really hard to get people to talk to us.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear from you some of the darkest things that you've seen in this industry and the things that you think shouldn't exist.
First and foremost, it is far too easy to get away with theft of either personal effects or body parts in the funeral business. There are plenty of opportunities if someone were so inclined to go in there with a scalpel, or not even necessarily in the case of an autopsy. All of the organs are conveniently presented to us in a bag.
What would a person do with a bag full of someone's insides?
If they were so inclined, they could make wet specimens, put them in a jar, fix them with formaldehyde or alcohol, and sell them.
So there's a market for that?
There is a market, yes, yes.
You could do that and it would be totally legal for you to do that?
It would not be legal to take the organ, but it is legal to buy, sell, and trade organs in 47 of the 50 states.
And it sells for good money? Like there's an incentive?
Oh yeah.
For this?
It can be very profitable. For example, this is my pen.
Okay.
And inside that pen is a slice of human brain. Now I've seen the brain that this slice came from. This was legal for me to buy. Perfectly legal.
Can I see it?
Absolutely.
So this is a little piece of brain?
Yes, it is.
A human brain?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where do you buy it from?
Facebook or Instagram. This was a woman who got access to some brains from a medical collection and took the time to slice them up and make these pens.
Why did you buy it?
I am involved in this trade because I'm also a collector of oddities, and most people don't have a piece of human brain sitting on their desk. I just think it's interesting.
And in the case where there are body parts that are taken, where do you think those are ending up?
Private groups for buying, selling, and trading oddities. Skin, for example, you could get away with selling like on Facebook.
Openly? Like, if I go on Facebook right now, I'm going to see people selling this stuff?
You would need to be part of a private group, or they're not going to let you in.
The oddities market can mean anything from animal taxidermy to antique medical tools to human remains. And it represents another ecosystem of buyers for those with legal or illegal body parts to sell. He agrees to show me the private marketplaces so I can see just how easy it is to pick up body parts in the US.
Finished. There we go.
Oh my God. Do you think this is human skin?
I mean, yeah, a human skin wallet for $2,500, that is on par with what the price should be.
So in this case, this person is selling a skeleton, and it's for the US only, and he's selling it for $4,650.
Yeah, very lucrative.
Late 19th century scientific skelly medical model. Is that what they say a lot, that this is old?
Yeah, they'll often claim that things are usually around 100 years old, so that they're minimizing any risk in case they are selling something that is fresh and therefore much more likely to be illegally taken.
Uterus.
Yeah, dissected human uterus, yeah.
$40. And a tongue goes for $1,100?
For $1,000, I'm surprised it's that high, because you could take one of those pretty easily.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. So this is skin with tattoos. How does a person procure one of these? I mean, how do you get it?
So that seems to be in good shape. It's obviously not very old. It's not all dried and worn out. It looks like there's still some hair on it. Yeah.
Here, this person asks, is this real human skin? How do you get this? I'm intrigued. And then there was no answer.
Yeah, good luck getting an answer to that. This is one of those examples where I think that it would have come from maybe an autopsy case. A piece of skin could just be taken off a body and no one would know the difference.
So illegally in that case?
Yes, yeah. I can't imagine how this would have been obtained otherwise.
Oh, that is so crazy. So if we're looking for some of the bad actors in this marketplace, do you think this is a good place for us to start?
So I want to see how many of the people in this group might actually be like funeral professionals or coroners. So we can search the members for, let's do coroner, and...
Oh, wow. Licensed funeral director, deputy coroner. So people who have access to body parts and bodies.
But yeah, there are a number of professionals in here.
You weren't expecting that, so.
It's kind of weird to think about. These are also people who would have access to getting scanned or organs and then being able to sell them, yeah. And I'm sure some of them are the people that do that.
That's so creepy. In terms of the oddities market, you know some of the big players.
I do.
That you believe are acquiring these illegally.
Yes.
Do you think they would talk to us? Do you think you could try to get us in touch with them?
I think that it's pretty unlikely. These are people who are breaking the law and I think would go to great lengths to not get caught. But I do believe that a lot of the human bones on the market right now are brought in illegally from other countries. I know that some come in from China, and I know that some come in from Mexico. That's just grave robbing, really is what it is.
So you think grave robbing is actually happening?
I think that a lot of the bones that are bought and sold in the United States were pulled out of the ground in another country.
Okay, so I think we're actually getting pretty close. They've told us we can't go in through the main gate. We have to go through a side or back entrance.
Grave digging sounds like something out of the 19th century. But apparently, it's still very much a thing.
Obviously, they say that the reason this is happening at night is because nobody knows that we're coming. Nobody knows they're doing what they're doing. I haven't actually met this guy, so I'm not sure what to expect.
I've learned that grave digging is a major source of black market bones and skulls. And through my connections in Mexico, I've come to see how it works. I've been given some specific instructions of how to find the spot. And it kind of feels like the start of every bad horror movie.
Nothing creepy about walking around the cemetery at night. Hola. Hola, buenas. ¿Pablo? Mariana. ¿Cómo estás, Pablo? Entonces, ¿aquí se hace?
Ahorita están extrayendo los restos de un cadáver. Esa fosa son como alquilada por 7 años. Cuando se cumplen los 7 años se saca.
¿Se sacan el cadáver?
Se saca el cadáver.
Mexico City is running out of cemetery space. 30,000 people die each year in the capital, and burial plots are scarce.
¿Qué solo huesos?
Son los puros huesos. Se ponen en un costal, fecha y nombre de las personas que fueron.
To make room, some cemeteries enforce burial limits, exhuming bodies after a certain number of years.
De ahí se llevan a una parte donde se almacenan. Muchas veces se recogen, algunas veces no.
¿Y si la familia no viene a recorrerlos, se venden o...?
Pues sí, algunas sí se vende.
Pero la venda de los huesos, de los cráneos, todo eso es completamente ilegal.
Pues sí, es ilegal.
Ilegal,
Sí.
venderlos,
Sí.
¿Y cuánto lo hace eso muchas veces ustedes o qué?
Bueno, sí, algunas veces.
¿A quién?
Pues muchas veces vienen estudiantes de odontología, porque cuando están estudiando se les solicitan el cráneo para estudiarlo,
Ajá. ¿Y por cuánto lo compran?
dependiendo en qué estado está el cráneo,
Ajá.
si está con todo y dientes, en qué estado.
¿Y si está hacia un buen cráneo, si lleno de dientes, cuánto?
Puede ser 6,000, 7,000 pesos.
¿Usted que los vende o quién, el dinero se queda con usted?
No, pues
¿Con
se reparte.
sus hombres?
Sí, se reparte.
¿Y cómo sabe usted que los huesos o que los cráneos, que las partes del cuerpo van para estudiantes? ¿Hay
Bueno.
modo de saber seguro?
No estamos seguros si lo quieren para eso. Sí, muchas veces hay para otras cosas, santeros. Lo solicitan los santeros,
Ujú.
que hacen trabajos con esos.
Entonces, algunas de esas cosas los huesos acaban también con santería y con brujería.
Santería, sí.
Ajá.
And just like that, I learn of a new set of buyers. Santeria is a Caribbean religion that fuses Yoruba beliefs from West Africa with Roman Catholicism. It's now practiced in parts of Mexico and the US too, and can sometimes include the use of human remains in secretive rituals performed by priests called santeros.
Nosotros sabemos que hay huesos de partes del cuerpo que vienen de panteones como en México y que acaban en los Estados Unidos.
Y sí puede ser, sí puede ser. Uno al vendérselo no sabe para dónde se los lleve.
Entonces, ¿acabaran ahorita o que encontraran?
Son los restos.
¿Están dentro del
Sí.
del saco?
De esta bolsa
¿De bolsa?
Sí.
Wow, it's crazy. It's so that's a skull with actually a lot of teeth in it. Ooh, the smell is very strong. Lots of body parts still with clothing. ¿Es normal así lo encuentran generalmente?
Sí, es normal.
Así un cráneo así, ¿cuánto vale?
9,000, 8,000 pesos.
¿Por qué? Porque está en buena
Sí,
condición.
tiene todos sus
Dentes.
sí, eso.
You can see how people can actually make some good money here. Sell this for $500, and in the US it goes for thousands of dollars. And apparently it's happening all over Mexico. ¿Sí? ¿Tenemos que ir? Okay. They said we should go. Okay.
The odd shape of this black market is coming into focus. But I still want to find an active buyer here in the US. That's what brings me to Miami, a city with an active Santeria community, and where a contact has put me in touch with a Santero willing to talk.
So I think we're close. Sort of an industrial area, looks like. I think that's it, actually. That's the white SUV. Hi.
Hey.
How are you doing? Can we see it?
Yeah.
Oh. So you're involved in Santeria, is that?
That's what we practice.
And what, are you sort of a priest?
Well, yeah, if you want to call it that, yeah.
How do you call it?
Priest, we're called Bawalao.
Bawalao.
Yeah, that's the highest rank that you could have in religion.
So Miami is sort of a hub for Santeria.
Oh yeah, big time, big time.
And in your ceremonies, bones and all sorts of different body parts, are those used in ceremonies, or how are you involved?
It's a religion that most people don't know. Most people you don't even think how far I could go with just the power of a chant. I could either save someone's life, or with a chant I could maybe kill somebody's life.
Can you tell me which bones or body parts are you talking about?
The most common is skulls,
Skulls.
but we use all body parts. You could use it for your protection, for anything, for avoiding bad things getting to you. But maybe you have a child with cancer, and he's dying, and the doctors can't do anything for him.
So are those the situations in which you
Sometimes.
do Santerias?
Yeah. My grandmother was dying of stage 4 of cancer, lung cancer.
And you performed a ritual on her ceremony?
Yep. And she's there.
She's still alive?
She's there.
Do you have anything with you right now?
I have, but it's not, I mean, it's inside the saint.
Can
you
we
know?
see it? Even if we don't see the inside?
Yeah.
Oh. So it's a shell, right?
It's a shell. Yep.
And then what's inside?
It contains a whole lot of ingredients and stuff, but the main one is the skull.
So there's a skull inside, actually.
This one I had to break it in pieces so it all fit inside. Yep.
How much do you have to pay for a skull?
Now I paid $5,000, so
$5,000
Yes.
for a skull.
they're expensive.
How old do you think it was?
I mean, this one in particular, they were twins. I think months.
8 months old.
Yep.
So baby twins.
Yep.
Do you worry at all where these bones, body parts, or skulls are coming from?
No, I don't really care. I mean, I just want to, resolve my problem for my people.
Do you have any idea where this skull came from?
Which one?
The skull that's inside here? I mean, where do you get your skulls?
I'd rather not answer that question.
But is it a place or a person?
It's a person that I usually, yeah.
Do you think this person would talk to us?
I mean, I would have to talk to him.
Typically, these sorts of asks don't pay off. But later that same day, he comes through. And I feel like I'm on the verge of meeting someone who claims to be a real player. If I can find him.
Is it here?
Yeah.
Weird about driving in the middle of nowhere. Hi, Mariana.
Gigi.
Hi, Gigi. Nice to meet you. Thanks for meeting us. We spoke with somebody who says that they've purchased some body parts and bones from you. Can you tell me, where do you get this stuff and how are you involved in the business?
I worked for a company that was a biomedical company and dealt with the donors, and the tissue went into a biohazard bin. It could have been anywhere from your big bones to your spine to your pelvis, right? All that would be discarded into a big garbage can, and it was done. That's it. It was gone, gonna go get cremated, right? And then there was a few things I was able to, you know, kind of take, right? And put it inside my sweater and kind of just put it in my bag. Right?
And there are no cameras there, nothing?
Not,
no
in the,
surveillance?
not once it was inside the biomedical biohazard bins. So this is an image of a big bone that I was able to take out. That was gonna get discarded.
Oh, so there's a lot of bags with
Yeah.
a lot of bones in. What bone?
That's a tibula.
Oh, the leg bone?
Yeah.
So you literally put it sort of under your sweater,
Yeah.
walked out with it, and then put it in a backpack
Yeah,
or a bag.
just, you know, simply just tucking it and going. There was many people that worked in the company that got caught up reselling discarded tissue on eBay.
No way. Finally, first-hand evidence of what I've heard throughout this journey. That the real threat in this black market are opportunists working inside the legal industry, like this guy and his co-workers.
There was many different people that did this as well. I was just one that, you know, excelled.
How long did you work at this tissue bank for?
I worked there for about 3.5 years.
I'm in Florida, where I finally connected with a man who claims to be a black market seller of body parts.
So you actually knew other people who did the same?
Yeah, and those people ended up getting dealt with through the company and were let go.
Oh, so the company actually found out
Yeah,
we're doing this?
yeah.
Oh, so
Right.
they let them go
Yeah.
because of it. And did the company ever report to the authorities?
I don't think so.
What body parts are we talking about?
It could vary. It could vary from a skull to a pinky toe. What people needed, human bones.
But you were also making money from it.
Yeah, I'm taking a bone and I'm selling it for $1,000, $5,000, $6,000, depending on what it is.
Is it expensive because it is not usually available, because it's hard to get, I'm assuming?
Yeah, in order to get a skull, you gotta go to the cemetery, right? And that's the only way to get it, is if we go into the cemetery. And there's only one cemetery here in Miami that's capable of offering that.
Wait, so there's actually a graveyard here in Miami where people go and...
Yeah, it's in the heart of Liberty City. It's a very old cemetery. It's filled, so there's graves that come out of the ground. And if needed, that's the place.
Have you done it too? No.
Yeah.
Grave robbing?
Yeah,
Oh, you have as well?
yeah. This skull here,
Oh, wow.
right, this was taken out of the cemetery.
So it's a skull that you procured, that you got, you
I
sold.
wanted to do this.
How much money would you say you made in total, actually, more or less?
Close to 80K.
I mentioned the buyer I met earlier.
He was my biggest customer.
And one of the things he did say he bought a skull for $5,000
Yeah.
from you. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, whatever he did with whatever I sold him afterwards was his matters, you know.
And if the police were to catch you, what do you think would happen to you?
I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of what could happen, right? But it's untraceable at this point.
Untraceable. A heartbreaking thought for the bodies of our loved ones. And a far cry from resting in peace.
When you die, do you think you want your body to be donated?
I'm not a donor, and I want to leave this message clear that this can happen to anyone. Regardless of you being a donor or not, your body parts are going to be sold. And it's going to be sold to them out of top dollar.
But you should note that every now and then, justice does get served.
Megan Hess and Shirley Cokie pleaded guilty to mail fraud.
For their crimes, Megan Hess was sentenced to 20 years, and her mother, Shirley Koch, to 15 years in federal prison.
Would I donate my body to science? No. I do believe in the work, but I don't trust the industry as a whole.
Around 3 million people die in the US every year. That's 3 million families trying to figure out burial, cremation, or donation arrangements for loved ones. But if the options seem hopeless, they're not. In the course of reporting this story, I met a lot of people on the hunt for the right option. It's out there. You just have to do your homework, like Sherry did.
I was diagnosed in 2013. I had a mastectomy. And then eventually I had a second tumor. I'm at the level of hospice that is end-of-life care.
How do you feel physically right now?
I have to have a lot of sleep, so I've sort of given in to that. And I eat like crazy.
She ate 24 cream puffs one night.
Without much time left, Sherry came to the decision to donate her body to science, specifically to a program at Western Carolina University that trains dogs to find missing people.
That a girl.
It made Sherry feel good that her body would be used to help other families after she's gone.
What would you say to the people who don't respect those wishes, who profit out of people's bodies without their consent? Whether you're running a funeral home and selling body parts in the back, or you're stealing body parts to use them in the oddities market, I think there's this idea that who cares? The person's already dead. Who cares what happens to their body? So what would you say to those people?
Well, it's, to me, probably one of the greatest forms of invasion. It's the final act of a human being. Your leaving is no small thing. So when you have someone who has moved into that process in an illegal way, I'm baffled and I'm hurt that a human could move in that cycle of thinking how they could sleep, how they could repeat it, how they could profit from it. It's beyond my capability to understand that part of our psyche.
I have to agree. I've spent much of my life embedded in black markets. I'd rather not be there in death, too.